Hello. So we are streaming now, and I see Sally, but let me check. How do we do the audio through the system again?
Yep. I'm here. I've had trouble hearing you guys till now.
That's connected. I'm unmuted. Is that all?
I think so. Sally, I could just hear you. Can you hear me now?
Now I can hear you, but I couldn't hear you before. I
can't hear her here though.
Okay, so hold on, let me.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Okay. It says there's a little check mark next to microphone, and it's a little check mark next to speakers. Oh, it says speakers, SVSIN series, and same as system. No, it's okay. You can? Yeah, I just switched it. Oh, cool. Okay. So here, let me. Do you want to test it through Zoom now?
Good, how are you?
Okay. Okay. Well, I can hang out too. We can call that. Okay. All right.
Do you want me to take the sign-up sheet up to listen to the speakers?
In a second. We just need to make sure the audio is working.
Hi, Laura. This is Emily. Can you hear me?
That's fine. Yeah, that's fine.
Laura, can you hear me?
Hi.
Hello.
Screen share. Oh.
Laura.
Testing.
Can you hear me, Laura?
Okay, why can't we hear her? Okay.
Laura, can you hear me?
Yes, yay. Okay. I think we're ready then, right?
Ladies and gentlemen.
Feedback. All right, hold on one second. Emily, do you know where the feedback might be coming from? There's a lot of feedback.
Laura, can you hear me?
Oh. Yay. Sorry, hold on. Hold on one second. Sorry. Let me try something else. Okay. All right, try it again. It's like they're playing. It's the video, I think. It's the streaming, but I'm trying to figure out where I have it open so I can close it. Okay, try again. Emily, can you hear me?
She's muted.
Yes, I can.
Yes, I can.
Okay.
Okay, we are good to go now, Lucinda. Thank you for your patience.
gentlemen, I'd like to call the
She'll
June
ask. I think we should roll
30th.
call.
I'd like to call the June 30th Quincy Farm Committee meeting to order. Laura, can we do, or is Emily gonna be doing it by Zoom? Are you doing a roll call or how are
I'll
we-
do roll call. Yeah,
Okay.
just to make it a little easier in person here. Okay, so Chair Green,
Here.
Vice Chair Vanderwerf, Commissioner Sidlow,
Here.
Commissioner Rockefeller,
Here.
Commissioner Scott,
Here.
Commissioner Maniatis,
Here.
and Commissioner Bennis.
Here. All right, can we all stand for the pledge of allegiance?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Well, thank you all for joining us. We'd like to start with our audience participation, and I believe a few of you have signed up to speak, so thanks, Jay. He's getting the list and we'll do it in the order that those have signed up. Is there anyone on Zoom that wants, no? Is there anybody on Zoom that's signed up to speak?
Rob Eber,
Oh, okay. Do we want to do Rob first?
however you prefer.
Why don't we go ahead? Rob, do you mind going first?
Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
I don't mind going first. I was at first going to listen a little bit. I just wanted to, Robert Eber, 3 Middle Road. I was going to listen with anticipation for where we're going to go with the meeting this morning. I am thankful that we've had a lot of public involvement recently. As you know, this has been a very long process. It started all the way before the current mayor became the mayor and was the chair of the Quincy Farm Committee. I am hopeful that we are able to weave a lot of the comments that we have received into the plan. And at the same time, my hope is that this is not a wholesale restart of the process. When my understanding of the process back a long time ago was that we looked at the model of whether this was going to be something akin to a Littleton Historical Society property with a working farm on it. And many months ago, that was moved away from for a variety of reasons. And many of the comments that have recently come into play have sought to try and return the farm to its working roots. And while I think many of those ideas are interesting, they were not ones that we originally looked at. So, you know, we're sort of going back and starting over if that process is what moves forward. At the same time, I do think that there are an awful lot of the agricultural activities, and I term it almost more in terms of the programming than I do in terms of the physical space, that are able to make tribute to the old agricultural roots. I would like to just add that one of the features that I think we can incorporate even at this late date in the process or in this restart of the process is that the Highline Canal offers an awful lot of wonderful opportunities to incorporate water use activities. And I would like to see that all of the activities that the Highline Canal Association to try and put water into the canal are an opportunity for Quincy Farms to make great use of water education, activities that actually take place even in the canal, since this is one of the only places that the village and that the canal is privately owned. I read with interest an awful lot of the comments that Kat's method of incorporating youthful education was give them something to do and require them to do it. And so getting people out onto the property and actually doing things is a wonderful opportunity for us to pursue. At the same time, I mentioned with caution that we are a bit of a different era than when my sister grew up riding as part of Pony Club and made great use of Cat Anderson's wonderful property. You know, while I would like to say that children today are very interested in, you know, hard agricultural work and learning by doing, and the mantra of Cat was a lot of no guff, let's get to work. And I'm not really sure that going back to an era where lots of the attitude was give our young people something to do and they'll thrive at the farm is one that will really work in today's world. So, you know, having a garden that relies on village volunteers, well, we all have wonderful large yards that we can take advantage of, and probably only 1% of us have vegetable gardens. So telling us that we're gonna have our kids go over and do sustainable farming at Quincy Farms may not be realistic. Similarly, the same thing about tending to sheep, tending to chickens. Of only a very few of us in the village have chickens. And, you know, I think that wanting to keep it agricultural and the thought of having village volunteers take care of this place and do the day-to-day activities is a little bit naive. So I'll close there and listen to what everybody has to say.
Thanks, Rob. Okay, next up, Kathy Fessler.
How about this? Good morning, I'm Kathy Fessler, and I've recently taken over for Susan McGuire with the Cherry Hills Land Preserve as the Executive Director. I'm looking forward to working with all of you on behalf of CHLP. We've been exploring what kind of educational programs we can still continue to do during COVID-19. And we have 3 programs that we would like to do at Quincy Farms: a stargazing night, a family bird walk, and a beekeeping 101 class. All of these classes will be subject to following the Tri-County Health Guidelines, and they would involve very small controlled groups. So if conditions allow us to continue programming, we'd like to get your support on doing those programs this summer at Quincy Farm. And I'm happy to answer any questions you might have about the programs.
I wasn't writing fast enough. Can you repeat stargazing, beekeeping, and?
Yeah, a stargazing night, which we did last year at Quincy Farm, and then also a family bird walk we'd be doing with Audubon. And in addition to that, a beekeeping 101 class. Thank you.
Thank you. John?
Thank you. Yeah, John Muir, 16 Parkway. My wife and I just moved into the village a year ago. So.
And I'm so sorry to interrupt, but if everyone could please try to get really close to the microphone so that people on Zoom can hear. They say they're having a little trouble. Thank you.
John Muir, 16 Parkway Drive. My wife and I moved into the village about a year ago, and from some information from my realtor, I was able to connect with Rob, who's just a couple doors down from where I guess north of where I'm at. I kind of look at this as the field of dreams. If you build it, they will come, and I will gladly sign up to be the first volunteer. But I guess my vision in my head is really to have a working farm with the sheep and a horse and goats and chickens. I was dumb enough to buy 14 chickens and built the Taj Mahal chicken coop in my backyard, which hopefully no one is flagging me for a building permit here. But it's been a lot of fun. it's a lot of fun. I was talking with my neighbor last night, who now he's the second person in the neighborhood that mows his own lawn, and he said, you know, this is actually pretty fun. So I grew up going to my mom's parents' ranch in Montana. They had 10,000 acres, and that was the coolest thing as a kid. I think there's definitely a lot of cool programs and things we can incorporate into it, but I guess, and I'm very new to this, so I don't want to step on anyone's toes for all the hard work people put in, but I think if we don't at least try to make it a working farm, then our generation, our kids' generation, is just going to become that much more removed from how our food's grown and how our animals are raised. And we have one of the coolest spots in all of Colorado to do something like this that's not driving out to 30, 40 minutes to do. I know I would put my kids to work there if my wife and I are lucky enough to have kids. But that's my 2 cents, and I'd be happy to help out in any way I could. I had a chance to meet some of you guys last week, but I've been into this for a long time. But it was that movie, The Biggest Little Farmer, that really got kind of my head and my brain cranking. And then I found out about this Quincy farm idea, and I said, how cool could this be? And it's only 3 blocks from my house. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, John. Debbie Wells.
Well, good morning, everybody. It's nice to see you. And my name is Debbie Wells, and I live at 4950 Sanford Circle West. And what I wanted to just say very briefly today is what staff seem to have in mind for Quincy Farm appears to be markedly different from what citizens have been asking for. The citizens hope that this dynamic will change starting today, as Councilwoman Chair Lucinda Green leads the committee through a list of recommendations submitted for the record by citizens on June 9th at the last Quincy Farm meeting. I appreciate the effort that each one of you is putting into Quincy Farm. I think it's just an absolutely phenomenal opportunity for Cherry Hills Village. It's exciting, and the citizens are looking forward to working with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Debbie. Dr. Jamrick, can you tell me how to pronounce that correctly? Jamrich, thank you. Sorry about that.
Thank you. As a father of a 10-year-old girl and a 12-year-old girl, I just wanted to give a different perspective on what Chair Eber had to say. We live in a time where I look for an opportunity to have my kids not on an iPad, not playing Minecraft, not doing something electronic. And having Quincy Farm close to us has been wonderful. The last few weeks, my girls have gone every afternoon they could just to groom Margarita, to brush Margarita, to feed Margarita. And it's the opportunities that we give our kids. Those are the important things. Yes, not every child is going to say, I want to do this. But I think if we give our children the opportunity, and that's what this is a tremendous opportunity, I think they will take that opportunity. I can't tell you how sorry they were to see Margarita go. I can't tell you how, if I say, practice piano, there's a lot of hemming and hawing. If I say, can we go, do you want to go and see Margarita? Do you want to brush her? Do you want to feed her? I mean, they're in the park, they've got the carrots, and they're there. And that's what I think people in this community really, really would like. So just a different perspective, and thank you.
Thank you. Any other Thaddeus, did you sign up?
Sorry, I didn't know there was a place I needed to sign. Hi, I'm Steve Scobie. I live at 4298 South Bel Air Circle, which is Cherrydale neighborhood, which is right across the Quincy to this project. I just heard about, and so I'm way behind, but the thing that I heard about this project was the thought that there would be possibly as many as 40 parking spaces. And maybe I'm way off on that, but it's, what I'm concerned about with all this is bringing a lot of traffic into this area. You know, we've already, with the COVID-19, the Highline Canal has gotten really busy particularly in this area. And to create an opportunity to bring people from all over the city to make the Highline more congested in that area is very concerning to me. So the only thing I would say is whatever we do there, I'd sure like it to be like if we do educational things, you know, 10 people at a time for a class or something, you know. And the other thing I would suggest is why not coordinate with Kent Denver, who has lots of parking, you know, so that, you know, use their spaces to, if you need to bring a van or something in with more people. I'd like to see, you know, if there's going to be a parking space, there's one on Dry Creek that has, it's beautiful. It's just a little 4 parking spaces, picnic table, covered, that sort of thing. I would hope that that's what this would look like, as opposed to a you know, a big event center kind of activity that brings a lot of people in. So thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Katie Philpott-Shozel. I'm not very interesting. I've lived in the same zip code for about 55 years. And I had the opportunity to ride with Kat and Candy, and I've had the opportunity to stay in touch with Kat and ride with her throughout her lifetime. So our love, our equestrian love had always been a very shared love, and I was very appreciative to her and Candy for the opportunity as a child, really, to learn about horses. I still have horses in the village. We live on the other side. And I apologize that I am also late to the game. I had envisioned a plan that reflected open space and called back to equestrian groups and involved children in a very informal way. And what I would say about the plan is I do appreciate all the hard work that's been put in on it, but just in the brief time that I've been looking at it, I don't really understand how it's going to be activated. I don't know who the partners are. I don't know who the children are that are going to be served. I don't know who's going to pay for it. And I'm really concerned about the amount of concrete and formality of the plan. I envision strolling paths and picnic area and certainly something lovely for our community and beyond, but I didn't expect a magnet that would bring a lot of congestion, a lot of cars, more pressure on the wildlife in the area. And I'm just not sure that that was the spirit of what Kat was thinking when she gave us this great gift of open space in Cherry Hills. So I would hope we could pause a little bit and think about it. And then I also have to tell you, I'm not very comfortable being here during COVID. I'm in an age group where I'd prefer not to be here. But I thought it was important to come today and just say that I think there needs to be more discussion in our community before we really do something that could impact the nature of our community in this way, to have an anchor attraction right at the Highline Canal. So thank you very much for your time, and I appreciate getting to make comments today.
Thank you. Any other comments during audience participation? Okay, hearing none. Thank you to all who provided information. The feedback is important. Okay, moving on to the consent agenda. Minutes of June 9th are in the packet. Does anyone have any additions, corrections, changes?
I move to approve the June 9, 2020 minutes.
All in favor? All opposed? All right, unfinished business, ongoing projects and budget. And I believe, Emily, were you going to discuss the security audit?
Yes, so give me just 1 second to get myself set up here.
Okay.
Okay, can you all see the memo on the screen?
Yes.
Okay. Great. Okay, well, good morning, everyone. So for ongoing projects and budget, I just have a short update. The budget and most recent financial statements are attached in your packet. And the main update for this agenda item is the security audit that park staff conducted with the police department on June 19th. The results of that audit are also attached as Exhibit C in your packets, which includes a list of suggested security measures. We do plan to implement the listed measures discussed with the police department. Some of them are already in place. Park staff has already installed gate posts on the east side, purchased signage to be installed, and plan to begin maintenance of the east side as of July 1st. We're also working with the city's security company on a quote for installation of wireless cameras for the farm. So there's a line item in the Quincy farm budget for general maintenance with approximately $23,000 remaining for 2020. So these funds could be used for camera purchase and installation, as well as some smaller items recommended by the police department, including gates for entrances off the Highline Canal and other improvements. There's no need for a motion on this item. It's really informational for the committee, so I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Do we know what the total cost of the proposed security upgrades? I mean, will it use all of that, the remainder of that budget? Do we have estimates?
Unless Jay has received something yesterday, I don't believe we have a total for the camera installation yet.
No, not until we walk the site with our consultant that we use, security, sound and site. And we will do that after July 1st so we can walk the entire property. But we do not have a bid from them yet.
Is there, there's been mention or discussions about restoring the gates. Is that included in this proposal? As opposed to just putting in some sort of a new gate?
Yeah, the gate posts that we're referring to would be for a new gate. The gate restoration would be included in later estimates about historic restoration of the buildings, I believe. So this gate would be ahead of those half circle gates, really to provide a barrier for vehicles. The half circle gates we'd want to protect and restore separately as part of the historic process.
Got it, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. You said that was not a motion item, but this was something that staff is recommending that we do.
That's correct. You don't need to make a motion. We are just going to continue, down this path of installing and pursuing these security measures, but the committee doesn't need to make a specific recommendation. We're just going to continue to work with the police department and continue to follow their recommendations.
Is anyone opposed to that on the committee? Okay, thanks, Emily. Next up, I believe, is the discussion of the caretaker.
Yes.
Emily, would you like to start with your memo and then we'll go from there?
Yes. So at the June 16th City Council meeting, Council discussed the possibility of a caretaker for the east side of Quincy Farm and asked for the Quincy Farm Committee's recommendation. So the committee has discussed the possibility of a caretaker in relation to the master plan process, but hasn't yet made a final decision since the plan is still in its first draft form. As it relates to the overall phasing and master plan, the farmhouse is the only building with a sewer connection on the east side. So a restroom on the east side is planned for that house since it's already plumbed. The only other alternative would be to run sewer line through the barnyard to provide that connection to a different building, and all the other buildings besides the farmhouse are historic buildings or are historically designated buildings. Since we do need a restroom in order to have small group activities and nature programming on the east side of the farm, staff does not recommend adding a caretaker who would then need to be removed before this work could begin on the farmhouse. For the sake of clarity for everyone, a caretaker should not be considered a security measure. The duties of a caretaker are to perform maintenance rather than be a security guard for the property. Right now, there are no existing maintenance duties that can't be accomplished by existing city staff. Facilities maintenance and parks employees are responsible for maintaining the Anderson house on the west side, which is vacant, and the surrounding area, and they have been performing these duties for the past 4 years. So staff is recommending a caretaker reside on the property only if and when there are animals on the property during a future phase of Quincy Farm. And that would also, be subject to the committee making that recommendation as part of the master plan. That being said, staff has included a number of possible motions in the committee packets, so the committee can recommend to council as they see fit. Any of these motions can also be modified if the committee so chooses. There are no exhibits or attachments to this item, and I'm here to answer any questions.
So as I understand it, staff will be making this motion to council regardless of what decision this group may make. So there potentially could be 2 motions out of this process.
That's correct, and that's not entirely uncommon for council.
I have a couple of questions. I understand that the Parks and Rec is going to be in charge of maintenance over there, as they are everywhere else on the farm. That they should be in charge, in my mind, as to who does and does not do the maintenance work over there. And that would say that I would agree that there's
may not be a need to have a caretaker per se, particularly if Parks and Rec doesn't want to use a caretaker to provide that maintenance. On the other hand, I'm looking at this recommendation and saying, if we want a restroom over there, it doesn't make any sense to me to put it inside a house that might be at some point occupied by a caretaker. I should think it would require a separate building of some sort that would be conveniently placed to use the existing sewer hookup, and that to put it anywhere else doesn't make much sense, given the barnyard path you outlined. But it seems to me to have it be adjacent or close to that farmhouse in a separate building would allow that construction to take place while that house is occupied. So it seems to me that maybe you want to call it, do not want to call it a caretaker, but I think what the neighbors want to see is, for security reasons if nothing else, is to have that house occupied. And if we were to look for a tenant, then you could free up the resume for that tenant having to be not only able to do a lot of maintenance chores around around the farmhouse, and but also concentrate on what we want that tenant to be able to do. Maybe teach kids how to grow crops, operate the farm, do the things that are important that get done over there by someone other than a bunch of maintenance work. So my suggestion is, why don't we design an outdoor, not an outdoor bathroom, that would not be right, a separate building for an adjacent restroom, and go ahead and look for a tenant for this place now, which would certainly increase the security of the east side neighbors.
I think one of the things that I always envisioned as we did, because we have been looking at this for a number of years, is that when in fact we had programming on the property, that an individual would be in residence, whether that was a graduate student, rotating series of graduate students, and they would, the primary role would be an educator role. So I do agree with you that is a key component. However, here we are in 2020, and I don't think any of us considered the untimely passing of Candy. I don't think it was probably envisioned when the thought and the gift was made. And I think there are some very real compelling reasons at this time to consider a caretaker, exactly as you say, so that the neighbors feel and that that area is considered secure with a person in charge. I think I would be in a position to recommend a caretaker at this time. We can't have a conversation. Sorry about that, John. I would be in a position to recommend that we have a caretaker at this time, with the understanding that we have the flexibility to make sure that when, and I think we're some time away from this, when we have programming opportunities, that individual then has an educator role and has that responsibility. That is, I think, the original idea that we were working on, but things have changed, and we have to be flexible and adapt.
I'd just like to follow up on what you said, Lucinda. So I think that this is a good point, that the person that we might want to put in the house would also be able to be an educator. If we have a tenant, that person is not necessarily there at all during the day, probably has another job somewhere else. So, so we might want to put that stipulation on the person.
I was just going to say, I agree with you, Lucinda. I think the neighbors would like to have someone in the house. I think that, I don't know whether this is true or rumor, but I had heard that a homeless person had on occasion slept there. So that was just, I do think that probably a caretaker would be a good idea. I was also going to add, this really is just digression. I had a four-legged visitor with antlers in my yard a few days ago. And when my dog started barking, he jumped over the fence into my neighbor's yard and then went over to Quincy Farm, and I hear that he hangs out there. We know Quincy Farm is a magical place. Any other comments on caretaker idea? I want to be sure we fully flesh this out. So I'd like to hear from everybody in the group before we consider what sort of motion we need to make. I think council has directed us to make a motion, so we do need to make a decision on this.
I just wanted to jump in briefly to clarify, Gordon, when you were talking about adding another building, that is unfortunately one of the constraints of the conservation easement. We can't add square footage on the east side of enclosed building space. So that was one of the things that we were looking at very closely with Colorado Open Lands when we talked about the outdoor classroom. And they went through and made sure, you know, outdoor classroom's not considered a building. It's just sort of a roof over some picnic tables. But another enclosed structure would be square footage. So that would not be permitted under the conservation easement. There might be a way to reduce the size of the existing farmhouse that would then sort of buy us the square footage that would be needed for a separate restroom. But that would be something that we would have to keep in mind with that plan.
Well, what if you, no, I'm not recommending this, but what if you demolish the small barn or one or two of the stalls off the that long building? I don't forget the name of it. Is that, in other words, can you substitute for a less desirable building or one that's
The way, yes, the way the easement is written is the total square footage can't be increased. So yes, under the conservation easement, you could take out one of the, you know, the baby barn if that was what was chosen, and build a different building there. However, the historic designation would dislike that approach.
This is Sally. Can you hear me?
Yes.
A couple of thoughts. So regarding the restroom, the open building to the left of the farmhouse, is that considered enclosed space or not at this point?
I don't believe so. I would have to check the easement.
And then within the actual, next to the baby barn are some storage space in rooms and then stalls that are enclosed. I'm not sure what they're all used for now. So there may be possibilities within the currently enclosed buildings that wouldn't significantly alter the spaces that are there. I don't know what that means for the historic nature. And then just to comment about the caretaker, I agree with others that have suggested that a caretaker could be beneficial at this time. I mean, this could be an interim caretaker that was there partly for their presence, where they may not at this time, because of the short time frame and where we are with Candy's passing, that this is an interim position where the person doesn't necessarily during this period fulfill all the educational roles that they might eventually. So kind of one comment and then a question about the restrooms, if you have anything to add to that.
Sally, what's the question?
The question was more about what's considered enclosed, and does the historic nature of the buildings preclude using a space that already exists and, for example, plumbing it for a restroom?
Joel, can you address that?
Yeah, so first off, about the caretaker, I think it's important to have some occupancy on this property. You can go around all over the city and even in Cherry Hills and see that there's unoccupied buildings. And they look inviting because they're not well kept and you don't see lights on. And some of those points were made even at the last meeting. But I think having some type of occupancy at both sides of this property is really important for both security and just appearances. As far as these restrooms go, I think there's lots of opportunity to put in a public restroom per se, if that's what you want to call it, or something that's accessible from the property itself, and you don't have to go into another residence. There's buildings that provide that opportunity. There is like a storage area to the west of the house that Candy was living in, and that could be one of those areas that could become a restroom. And I don't think you wouldn't necessarily need to have nobody on the property in order to build that, and that would be close to, I'm assuming the sewer line comes from Quincy. So those are my thoughts about having, I don't know if you want to call it caretaker per se, but having occupancy on the site, and as well as putting in restrooms that are accessible to people that are visiting the site in the near future or in the further future as part of the master plan.
Yeah, I mean, I do support a caretaker there. I can't see any downsides, perhaps having someone live at the property. And I understand that we have a resume from a gentleman who works full-time at the Village Club. And it sounds like he has the requisite skill set to be able to fix problems, whether it's plumbing or electrical, as they come up. And it's convenient, he's close by. I think that we should consider that it may be a good fit for the property.
My question is maybe for staff. I would think we would need to go through the regular sort of process that the city is required to use to, even if it's just an occupancy, it's really non-paying. It's in exchange for the person living there in exchange for room.
Yes, we would need to go through the normal hiring process.
So that would be, defining the job description, posting the job, and then going through that process to get an individual in place.
Correct.
Other comments or thoughts on the issue of the caretaker? Would someone like to make a motion?
Joel, you may need to make that motion because your thought was not using the word caretaker necessarily. I think that's probably accurate.
So I'd like to make a motion that the city council, that they entertain the idea of hiring or coming up with some type of lease agreement for somebody to occupy the structure on the east side of Quincy Farm.
Second.
Any additional discussion? Okay, it's been moved and seconded to that the Quincy Farm Committee will recommend to City Council that and the hiring of an individual to occupy the property. Do we want to clarify time? Do we want to put any other clarifiers on this? Okay. It's been moved and seconded that City Council the Quincy Farm Committee recommend to City Council that they entertain the idea of hiring an individual to occupy the east side of the property. And the role at this time is to be determined by a future job description. Is that correct?
Actually, I do have a question. What would the timeline be on that? Do you know? Is it going to be months and months?
I do not know. I do not know. Our process is to make the recommendation to council, and I suppose we could get it on is there a meeting in July?
The next meeting is July 21st.
So we could do this July 21st, make the recommendation to council. And then how quickly they could act on it is up to their process. Okay. Okay. Are we all good on what the recommendation is? I want to get it correct. All right, so we've moved in second. We're going to recommend to council that they hire an individual to occupy the east side residence. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, we'll make that recommendation. I will be bringing it to council on July 21st. Okay, I think our next step is to go through the comments that were presented by the public and kind of read through and summarized by committee members. And I think what I'd like to do, we decided on a procedure that we would talk through these comments one by one. And so I direct everyone's attention to Exhibit B. And we'll go through these one by one, and then to the extent that an item is addressed in a prior comment, then we don't need to cover it in the subsequent comments, but we will go through everybody's point of view. So in my packet, and is everybody still agreeable to that procedure? Okay. So and the purpose of these comments then is to provide feedback to the consultant for their next draft. Okay. In my packet, I think comments from Quincy were the first list. Is that correct? Everybody has it that way? So, Quincy, how would you like to start?
So in my comments, I categorize the issues as primary and secondary. And I'm thinking maybe we could just go through what I see it as the primary. And then I think hold off on secondary because maybe go to somebody else. I feel like I don't want my comments to totally control this discussion. So.
Fair enough. So in our packet, we heard that the comment is about parking. So the comments that we heard is that we had too many spaces, we can't turn a trailer around, the drive bisects the property and it's too, in its current location, it's too close to the Highline Canal. And so I think what I'd like to do, if you'd like to weigh in on your comments and then we'll all chat about it and come up with what direction we'd like to share with the consultant as a group.
So I think that for many of us, seeing or hearing that there were 40 parking spaces was something of a surprise. And I feel like we need to take some responsibility for that. But because in between when we saw a very preliminary draft and the later draft, the parking had indeed ballooned, but the spaces were actually counted. I personally agree that 40 is way too many, and I think a lot of people will come to Quincy Farm on foot and maybe on bicycle, but that we still do need some parking, and I'm just going to throw out a number of maybe 15 spaces in a sort of in a primary lot that would be kind of the permeable surface.
But if it happened, for example, that there was stargazing at night and people were not comfortable walking from Kent or something like that, there could be an overflow. That's just the field next to where the current parking is called out. I also put in my comments that I do think there has to be a way for cars and maybe shuttle. You know, we've heard the comment about why not bring people from another lot by shuttle. So there has to be a way for that. And if we have animals, we would need some kind of a way to bring animals on and off. I would think if an animal is sick, you might have to take it off the property. So there has to be a way for those kinds of vehicles to turn around. I was proposing maybe that there's sort of a circle around the parking space where that's actually a circle around. I see a lot of sense to having the parking lot where it's currently shown. And that it makes a lot of sense from the standpoint of the flow on the property. The second bridge that's proposed would be there, so people could be dropped off. There is a gate in between the chicken coop and the big barn, and people who are gathering for an educational session or a tour could go through the gate and wait in the sort of gathering area. People who are going to the Nature Activity Center on the west side would cross the bridge and go down the hill that way. And so Lucinda and I did look at the northeast paddock as a place for parking, and I thought there were a lot of things wrong with that. So you would still be coming in the same entrance unless we had an entrance off of Quincy, which would indeed make a lot in the north, or make a parking lot in the northeast paddock a trailhead for the Highline Canal. I don't see how you could avoid that. But let's say people came into the same entrance, and it doesn't make sense for them to turn right away into the northeast paddock. That again looks like trailhead parking. And so they would still come farther into the property. But if you were to turn left into the northeast paddock, we would have to take down the paddock where we are currently thinking about, or where I saw would be a good place for animals, if we have live animals on the property. So that would mean going beyond kind of the little stable barn and then turning left, which is coming into the property the same distance as you would come in if you would have it in the south field. So I think those were my thoughts about the parking lot, but I am totally amenable to other things. It has some good logic behind it. Well, I think one of the challenges we've had is trying to reconcile the idea of letting the property be open for important drop-in visitors who would like to come and experience the farm outside of programming opportunities. So the children who wanted to come work or dig or play or what have you, or go over and pet, would not have to do that in the context of a formal program. And so I'm having difficulty reconciling how we look at usage and appropriate access, and then where we cite the parking to address significant congestion concerns and significant security concerns. And this has been a real issue that we've struggled with. I'm not opposed to either, but I think we have to consider parking and the size in context of the access and how it's gonna be used. Is it going to be a facility where you can only walk, ride your bike, and park your bike, and ride your horse in, and then only parking available for program activities? Or do we want to share this beautiful space with lots of folks who may choose to drive there? So I think that's the concern that I'm still not fully resolved. The front entrance is challenging in terms of access, the location on Quincy, the curve of the canal. That crossing there is already somewhat problematic. And so if we have a slowdown for ingress and egress, I just don't know. I'm not a traffic engineer, so I don't know how this works. And I'm looking for guidance as to how we might address that.
Well, parking was a hot topic about this master plan, which is really good feedback. It's a balancing act of how we'd love to keep this property the way it sits right now, because it tells its own story if we leave it the way it is right now. But this master plan is trying to balance that along with the needs that are going to come up with making this accessible to other people. So I think it should be pushed back onto the consultants and say, here's the feedback we've had. 40 parking spaces is too much. Here's all of our concerns about it. It's close to the Highland Canal. Don't want this to become a trailhead for the Highland Canal for people that aren't going there to experience Quincy Farm and understand what it is. And that also goes for the second bridge and the second entrance. I can see the importance of leaving it the way it is, and there's this current bridge that's always been there, and that's how the farm has functioned for many, many years. But I really think that these comments should go back to the consultants and that they should work with some options on it. The current parking area does add a lot of parking, but it bisects the whole east side, which really changes that experience of the property as it stands. So that's my suggestion is, in regards to parking, it's put back into their court so that they can do what they do, why they were hired to do it, and have them start, working on other plans. And even coming up with other ideas of partnerships with Kent. I don't know the relationship with Kent as far as parking over there, or even having some type of trail that leads you from Kent where you park, where you might have to walk a little ways to get to there. Maybe that's unrealistic, but those are the kind of things I think should be commented on and sent back to the consultants.
No, I do think that is realistic, and I don't want to see 15, 20 cars there. I think it diminishes the experience. I think we can figure out a better way to do this, whether it's parking at Kent Denver, whether it's parking here, and maybe there are bikes that that visitors who want to go over to Quincy Farm can ride over there. It's a 2 or 3 minute ride. I think there are other ways to figure this out, but if it bisects each side of the property, I think it diminishes and decreases the overall experience there. So I would be opposed to additional parking.
I would just like to say too, I agree with you. We have a very good relationship with Kent Denver Schools, and they certainly have, they care what happens with Quincy Farm. So I agree with you.
This is Sally. It's Sally. Do you hear me?
We got it, Sally.
I'm sorry.
We can hear you.
Okay. I do think having the consultants look at it is a good idea. I do like the idea of fewer parking spaces. I do think that there should be considered some type of turnaround situation, at least that it could be done on the east side if possible, just for flow reasons. It may end up that park as an entity is a thing for staff that's there and handicapped people, and then for a lot of the time, it might be a drop-off area, and other times you might utilize more of the spaces. I think the discussion of how to use other areas in a low-touch, altered way, meaning something like a field or without paving, is also part of that discussion, but it's something that they can consider. I do think it's interesting and would be important, again, to discuss access and using the bridges. I certainly got the distinct feedback from many people who commented that they want it to be a little more low touch, a little more low tech, but certainly a bridge that is safe for access is desirable. I don't know whether it comes within the consultant's purview to explore with neighbors like Kent Denver for access parking when needed, or whether that's a sidelight of all this. But I do agree for the reevaluation of the parking.
And I also think that, you know, when we're putting the cart before the horse here, we are trying to speculate how many parking spaces and how many people we're expecting to have when we don't know what the programming looks like. You know, it's really hard to estimate. I mean, are we going to have small groups? Is it going to be school children? I mean, in my mind, I envision, you know, 2 school buses showing up Monday, Wednesday, and Friday with 50 school children that come in for a few hours. The buses come in, they can leave them there, come back a few hours later. It's minimal impact, minimal dust, and you don't have the problem of, you know, a number of cars turning in and around. I mean, if we have an exhibit there or a, you know, small library, photographs, that sort of thing, and you have 20 or 30 cars turning around in there every single day, I know because I own a ranch, it generates a lot of dust and the maintenance of it and so forth. It's a lot of work to upkeep that. So it's something that I believe we should consider the programming and the expectation of who will be, you know, attending that programming before we're able to really get a good handle on how many parking spaces we're going to need.
Emily, can you clarify for us where we are in terms of the contract with the consultant and timeline left and funds available?
Yeah, so we only have a few $1,000s, I think, out of our contract with the consultant, and their end date right now is September 1st. We know that will need to be extended, you know, even just because of COVID, that would need to be extended. So what I'm hearing from the committee right now is for the consultant maybe to draft a couple different options for you to review. And bring those back, you know, maybe parking in the northeast corner, maybe a reduced parking area where it is now, and bring that back for the committee's review. And then I will separately work with the consultant to figure out costs going forward and be able to bring that to council, because we would need council to approve more funding in order for us to move forward with extra work from the consultant. But am I hearing that right, that the ask is for the consultant to present different options to the committee for parking?
I'm in agreement with that.
Yeah, not only for parking, for a lot of other items too.
Right, we're not there.
Right, okay.
I mean, what are we creating parking for, though? I mean, how many people, what are we looking to do here? Are we doing programming? Are we doing, is it open to the public? We don't really know. We don't know.
Well, yeah, I think we do know. I'm going to push back a little bit on that. I think we've had a lot of experience with programming, and we do have, even though it's not in the draft master plan at this time, I think we all have a pretty good idea about the kinds, and we've heard feedback, the kinds of programming that we'd like to see happen in general. And I think to Christina's point, if we have a nighttime programming, stargazing, I think it is important for us to have some on-site parking. I think it was envisioned by Kat that parking, while it is not available on the west side, it could be made available on the east side. So I think the direction that we get new options and have some available. We do have to have handicap spaces available, so we do have to find a location for it. And, you know, what I'm hearing everybody say, the buses, the partnership with Kent, even a shuttle from this parking lot, you know, all of these are still options. I think what we need to do is settle into what's required from an ADA perspective and what we anticipate if we have nighttime programmings for the safety of people who want to attend, because I think that is contemplated. And so we've got to come up with some area, certainly smaller than 40, you know, but I think there's got to be some space made available on the property and on the east side. So we just got to figure out the least impactful.
Yeah, and I like the idea of the overflow parking in the pasture. You use it whenever you need it. I agree.
Okay, so are we in agreement on parking that we will ask, one of the things we'll ask the consultant to look at is different options. And then Emily, would you have time before council to chat with them about what that looks like in terms of cost? Among other things that we're gonna add.
Yes, I will do my best to get all of that together before council.
Okay, all right. Okay, anything else on parking? I think we sort of have an idea. We need some more ideas. We need to be more thoughtful and figure it out. Spend a little more time on it, correct?
I'd just like to say one more thing. I would think less than 28 parking spaces as well. I think some use it something like 10 or 15. I think that would be the most. This is Becky speaking.
So I think the consultants could benefit by having some direction about the parking. With the numbers, as you mentioned, I think it's bad visually to put the parking in the northeast corner of the property, because that the visual expectation by people that drive by to think that they can park there, and maybe, you know, what they need to do, what the consultants need to do is look at what a minimal amount of parking for the ADA requirements are, for maintenance, just for the day-to-day activities of how this property is going to have to function. Emily, if you want, I'm more than happy to have a discussion with them. You know, maybe it's a parking could go to the, I'll call it the south of the stable, because it's kind of out of sight, out of mind from both the canal and from Quincy, but it also doesn't bisect the whole property as what they have proposed right now. So I think a little direction to them would also help, so that to keep the costs at a minimum.
That sounds reasonable. I mean, I think that if you build it, they will come. If you build a parking, or if you put parking there close to Quincy, people will use it as a trailhead. And so I think that's a great idea. You put it out of sight, so it's not, you know, readily accessible by people that are using the High Line.
I also, this is Sally, and I also think it's important to build in enough flexibility with the concept of parking that if the issue comes up of safely dropping people off, that there is an answer for safely dropping people off, whatever that looks like. And that's mainly because the idea of programming for children, they probably wouldn't be driving themselves. They probably wouldn't be walking long distances themselves. Just a thought.
Okay, so with reference to parking, what I'm hearing is that we are going to ask for some new options, new locations, with the direction that we have 10 to 15, no more than 10 to 15 spaces. We do have to have the ADA spaces, so that'll have to figure it in, and we'll rely on their expertise on that. And then we will continue to consider that as we continue to develop the site plan. Okay, all right. Lucina, your next one is the second bridge.
Right, and I think that the second bridge changes if the parking
changes. So maybe the issue here is, several people were, not in favor, several people who commented were not in favor of the second bridge. I believe if we get rid of the second bridge, we probably have to replace the first bridge. That it's really not up to code in terms of the public use, especially if horses were to try to cross it. And so maybe the discussion is, and maybe again, this is contingent on where parking is or where the turnaround is. So where that, if we only want one bridge, where that bridge goes. And again, I think that when we replace it, that Denver Water has some standards as well. Is that right, Jim?
They will have some say, but we actually do own that property. So, but we will still have to work with Denver Water, but we will have more say than anywhere else on the High Line as to what and where we can put it.
And as I sort of put in my comments, again, the reason that the location that the consultants had chosen was, it looked, for the flow of traffic, it just looked like it was a good place, because it would land people close to the activity center, the nature activity center on the west side. The current location lands people, well, first of all, we have to look at how a handicapped person would make it down the hill onto the west side. So there would be some re-engineering of a lot of things. That is true as well if it goes in another location. But the current location lands people farther down the driveway from the activity center. It actually lands people about where the trail on the west side starts. And remember, that trail is not a public access trail. And it's also lands people close to Jerry's house, which might be good if it were an historic house, but might not be good if there is a tenant there. So just throwing those thoughts out. I think the bridge issue does have a great deal to do with circulation between the two sides of the property. And I think, like you say, that may be an issue that has to be considered or reconsidered in context of where parking is. And I like the location of the second bridge because I think it flows better from into the use of the west side, but I'm open to consideration there.
Joel, do you have any comments as to whether or not the existing bridge is sound enough, whether it's suitable for equestrian use? Should that be a concern?
Well, it's certainly suitable because that's what it's been used for many, many years. You get into these historic structures or historic things, and engineers come in and say, well, this isn't going to work. And it's been standing for hundreds of years. So
it's hard enough shape to use. And
well, I think this just goes on the list of the consultants. So, rework the parking, consider that second bridge, because obviously it was incorporated into their master plan because of the amount of parking that they have on the east side, connect the two sides, and look at that. And the bridge will more than likely need to be rebuilt so that it's safe for people to walk across, so that it's ADA compliant as well to get people across. So I just think you just add this to their list of revising the master plan. And once you start to get into that, then you can start talking to the structural engineers and the civil engineers about how you can get people safely from the east to west side, whether they have disabilities or not, and also consider that it would be used for horses.
I'd like to say,
bridges are expensive. And it's going to change and I don't have an opinion really. I think the old bridge is beautiful. A new bridge is going to change the look because it's going to be concrete. It's going to be, I mean, I'm pretty sure it'll be concrete. And it won't be, I'm just throwing that out, that it's going to change the look.
You're right, it will change the look if you tear that one down. There might be ways to work with it. Again, this is something that the engineers and the consultants can weigh in on. If the charge is from the master plan or from the committee or from the city that we want to retain this bridge and it's the way it is right now for its historic nature, then that's a challenge to them to come up with ways to work with it.
Mm-hmm. I might offer, are you familiar with what we call the Green Bridge, which is at Dahlia and the parking lot at Dahlia, on the High Line?
Yes, I am.
Okay, well, we've lived here 40 years. When we moved in, there was a wooden bridge there. So now, and it's not a huge bridge, but it is concrete and metal. So, I mean, I'm sure that they can get around it, but I'm just saying, it's going to be a different look.
So, Becky, I think your comments are sort of arguing for a second bridge. Because if we wanted to keep, the first bridge, it would, maybe wheelchairs couldn't go across it, but.
And maybe you add a new bridge next to the existing bridge.
Maybe.
There's multitudes of options there.
Yeah.
And again, I'd say not push back, but just give this feedback back to the consultants and let them know where we're coming from, because we've got so much feedback once this master plan came out, how that people can see what's going on. So it makes a lot of sense that we're getting a lot of information from the public about this is what we like, this is what we don't like, and consider these things. And I think it's really important for the process. And having the consultants go back through this and keep massaging it and working through with all these comments, this is a step in the right direction for this process. This is not a short, quick, easy process to go through. It'll be long.
I agree with Joel. I also think that one reason the consultants are here is they can visualize things that do call in all the historic parts of the building complex, and that a new bridge, quote unquote, doesn't have to look new. That's within their purview.
I understand. Okay, so what I'm hearing, everybody, the consensus is that in addition to parking, because it is somewhat related, we have to address the bridge as well in that context, keeping in mind what we might need for handicap access or ADA. We do have handicap spaces, don't we, on the west side?
Yes, we do.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay, all right. But we'll put that one on the, to be considered with the consultant too, to come up with options. Okay, next is the addressing the main gathering area on the east side and the fire pit. I wonder if we could skip that for now, because I think other people's thoughts about that were better than what I have. So I don't want to lead off with my stuff, but why don't we go to the fourth and then go to someone else's comments, and I know we'll touch on that. Oh, okay. So you want to do number 4, which is a working farm? Yeah. Okay, yeah. And this kind of gets to the heart of a lot of our discussion. So working farm. So personally, I've always seen animals on, on Quincy farm. But I've also come to think that while the emphasis might be on animals, that we would be missing out on some opportunities if we didn't try to do some other things as well. And, you know, I point to the Nature Activity Center on the west side. And I point to the pond and the opportunities there. And I think, you know, the idea of kids stopping by to help care for animals is a really cool idea. I think I myself don't have a lot of experience with animals on a farm and caring for them and that kind of thing. But I think there's a lot of opportunity. As I said in my comments, I don't think that this is a large enough piece of property to support a lot of large animals. So we might have to be sort of creative in what we might recommend. And another one of my thoughts is maybe the animals aren't on the property during the winter when you have fewer visitors. Although, you know, like, you know, you might have some other thoughts because you may have visited Glacier during the winter and all of that. But obviously we would need a caretaker when the animals are there. So it looked like, you know, the sort of stable barn looked like a great place to house animals. And then there was outdoor pen where they could also go. And the, you know, different animals require different care. So if you're teaching about the care of animals, or if you're having children help, maybe different animals rotate through the farm. Anyway, just throwing those thoughts up there. I too agree that animals are an important part of the equation here. The idea of more vegetative crops and things being added to the property is kind of a new idea for us to consider. And as I look at the south end of the property, I'm trying to determine, you know, what space might be required for those areas. And it brings into question really kind of the, you know, I'm going to jump ahead here. One of my questions is still trying to understand the role of horses on the property, because we were going down a path of honoring that pony club tradition, and that equine animals would be welcome on the property. There would be space for them to recreate. We envisioned, I think, that folks would come ride their horse to the property and use it. Do we need another riding facility within the village? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe that was a direction that we needed to think through a little more fully. But I'm still not clear on the juxtaposition of those two things. If we do more agricultural row type crops, what impact does that have on the use of horses on the property? And how do we reconcile those two? So I think we always envisioned, like I said, we would have the lambs and the chickens and the goats and those kind of things. And we did envision caretaker for those. And I'm going back now to long early conversations. So what is challenging at the moment is trying to work in that equine piece. We don't think a livery is important. I think we addressed that. So how do we put those uses in that space down there? And that's what I'm still don't have a clear understanding on.
Well, I'll reiterate what I've said often after trying to understand what makes this property unique. And it is the fact that horses were on this property for many, many years. And that tells its story. Row crops, I don't know if any row crops were grown on this property or even when it was a much larger farm. I would gather that what was being grown was crops that would feed the horses. So again, I think back to the consultants, I'm working on this whole south end of the east side and embracing that history of Quincy Farm, at least the recent history. I mean, I'm certainly go back and there were all kinds of other things being grown there, but I really turn towards the more recent history, the people that can speak to their experiences with this property in the past. And that's what I think consultants need to integrate into this master plan.
I have, Sally, I have one comment. In terms of vegetative crops, I think it's important for whoever knows the answer or who will discover it, to know a little more about water availability on east and west, just to really truly consider what is possible in kind of a make sense kind of way.
Right, because the topography says it's, the water's not going to flow uphill. So there wasn't any water on, unless it's city water on the east side. So that would have to be city water. Is that correct, Jay? In irrigation, and I don't believe we're going to have the ditch water anymore. I mean, over time that will go away too. So
there is a connection to that side from the pond. So there is irrigation water from the pond on that side, as well as city water.
So let me jump in with a little bit of extra history. So we don't have specific references in the historic information that I know of about crops being grown. So we know that originally the farm was a dairy farm. Since the Hanans lived there in the 50s, it has been a horse property. The pastures were used for hay. And the reason that we went with an orchard on the east side is also because we know sometime in the 30s or 40s, we don't quite know the year of the aerial photograph that we have, but there was an orchard on that east side. So that was the intention behind restoring that orchard, was having real fruit trees to be able to show kids part of that history and trying to get historic Colorado apple varieties in that orchard. So that's a little bit of context for what the farm used to be and what we know about the history and why some of those elements are in the plan right now.
I'd like to add just a couple things to that. When it was a dairy farm, the property itself was larger, wasn't it, Emily? It wasn't just 15 acres.
That's correct. It was, at one point it was like a 200 and something acre parcel. It was
right.
much larger. It included most of Kent Denver.
And the property got subdivided.
Yes.
To the south. And also when Ed Hanan, raised horses, his business soon outgrew the property. So, and that's why it's called Quincy Farm, because he moved, he bought some property farther away on, that was still on Quincy Avenue. So Quincy Farm.
Yes, it was out in Aurora.
Yeah. Any other thoughts on general use of the south side? Can we give better direction to, does anybody have suggestions how to give better direction to incorporate these ideas of agriculture with the equine?
I know nothing about horses, but I do have I have about a dozen fruit trees. And Kent Denver also has a large orchard that they planted. How many years ago? Sorry, can't hear me.
Kent Denver planted, maybe 80 fruit trees, maybe 50 to 80 fruit trees by the dining hall. I would say there is such a thing called fire blight. It has affected my trees this year. It's not without some problems. I guess I would offer that. And as far as the horses also, I think if you find the right nonprofit or person who might bring in horses and have classes and so on, but I think it's going to depend on an individual.
With reference to your fire blight, there are resistant varieties, and our biggest challenge with fruit orchard obviously is our early freezes. It's hard to, and we've had really unpredictable weather of late. So yes, it is a challenge, but that is part of the learning and part of the education. And so I happen to like the orchard idea. I would like to continue to see it explored, notwithstanding acknowledging the challenges. Okay, so I think what we're going to do is send these comments to the consultant as well to kind of talk us through additional opportunities that are program driven, really, in the site plan. And so we'll look at that.
Can I say something?
Of course.
I just have some ideas here, some notes that I had made. And some of them are included in the comments that are in the packet there. But I mean, since we're on the topic of what to do there, I mean, it's important to consider that maybe we take a step back here. I know we've talked about the details of what types of animals, what types of row crops, and the more of the minutia of what happens there. But I think if we take a step back and look at this at a 30,000-foot view, I mean, I think there are two different types of themes that can be taught at Quincy Farm, and that is natural history and cultural history. And I think with the natural history, it's pretty obvious. It's living organisms, it's plants, it's animals. And with Quincy Farm, I mean, maybe its predominant use was not as an equestrian facility, but it's hard to envision a property like that that does not have horses. And it doesn't mean that we need to have 10 or 15 horses. It could be 2 horses. Something that's representative of that. There's also other opportunities: geology, paleontology, botany, zoology, and also with the stargazing, there's it could be a program unto itself. But let me move on to the cultural history. Of course, the cultural history is the human factor, the history of settlement and development of the American West, including ranching, agriculture, water rights, land management, vernacular architecture, which Colorado is known for, but also geography, political history. Eisenhower was involved in his properties, we all know. Art, music. I know Keith was a big classical music fan and loved classical music. And I think there are opportunities there to do low impact, maybe they're classical music events. Maybe we bring a quartet out there to do fundraising events during the summer that are low impact that the neighbors appreciate and can enjoy. And I know Jerry looks like she stepped out, but she made a great comment. Historic places present the opportunity to explore these broad themes in American history. And certainly Quincy Farm in its current condition is the perfect location for these types of studies. I think that there would be a great opportunity to reach out to the schools that we have here, Kent, Cherry Hills Village Elementary, and St. Mary's, and work with the educators there to extend the curricula. I mean, this is a perfect backyard classroom. Can you imagine this property? If we had, I mean, we can start as early as kindergarten when children are at that point where they have intellectual curiosity and wonder. Christina, thanks for bringing that up. I mean, when I was young, we used to visit Glacier Barn in Glendale. The property's no longer there, unfortunately, but it had such an impact on me that I still remember bobbing for apples. I remember the farm animals. I remember the smell of the barn. A lot of these, I mean, what we're doing is we are cultivating the next stewards of Quincy Farm, so that 25 years from now, those kids will be sitting in this room having discussions about keeping Quincy Farm operating in perpetuity. And it's not a stretch. I mean, we don't live in the least affluent, community in Colorado. It's not a stretch to suggest that when we bring 500-600 school kids during the course of the school year, to have them donate, $10 or $15, so that it could be also a mechanism by which we raise a little bit of revenue, notwithstanding the expectation that we have, we're going to think that it's going to offset all of the operating costs, but the opportunity to generate a little revenue is not a bad thing. I mean, in my mind, a lot of the aesthetic refreshments there, the moon gates, the equestrian art, the tire swing art, the sculptural play. I mean, I guess I would rather see that in a public park rather than in a working historic. I mean, this is a late 19th century, early 20th century property that you don't find very often. And I think with K through 12, I think we can capture every single, I mean, from kindergarten to 12th grade, and the curricula can become increasingly more and more complex and more difficult. And I think that we should rely on the educators in our community here that are within just a mile or two from here to come up with programming. And I'm sure that there's some of this curricula already exists, so it wouldn't be much of an effort, in my opinion, to work with them and partner with them to have this as an ongoing program. And a couple of other notes. I mean, with the stargazing, there are a lot of opportunities I don't think we're considering. I mean, stargazing is, to me, is a wonderful opportunity. I mean, you have the opportunity in Colorado, and because of the location of this property, where you can observe satellites in low Earth orbit. It's unusual to be able to see that. I'm sure most people have never observed the International Space Station in low Earth orbit, but you can do so even in this part of the metro area. And I know we can engage volunteers, docents, educators. I know that because of the special quality of this property, I know that we can bring in many special guests. I know there are a lot of talented, educated people that would love to come out and have an opportunity to speak on the history of agriculture, ranching, or a variety of different topics. I know that I'm very well connected in the space community because I'm a military officer in Colorado Springs, and we can bring an astronaut to come out and do the stargazing talk. Or again, I know there are a lot of people that would love the opportunity to dedicate their time to come out and spend a few hours at Quincy Farm. And I keep hearing less is more, and I keep hearing children. And I think that if you read my comments, I think the most noble effort that we can give forth here is capturing and educating children and create, again, as I mentioned, cultivate this next generation of Quincy Farm. What I don't want to see, which is unfortunately what's happened with a lot of properties in Colorado, is that everyone, people are excited about it. 5 or 10 years go by, it becomes a maintenance nightmare, it becomes a financial expenditure that very few people are willing to keep going. And if we're able to, because we have hundreds and hundreds of children here, we're always going to have a constant steady supply of interested parties that are young enough to appreciate it and will remember it when they become a little older. Thank you.
If I could follow up on your comments, one of the things I think that I suggested in my comments is, we're not going to program, as a committee that's doing the master plan, we're not going to be programming the property. In other words, selecting what classes are taught. But I think that it would be wonderful to have someplace in the index of this plan where not just our ideas, here are some of the village's ideas for what could happen there. That, some of your ideas for the astronaut doing the stargazing, and maybe, I'd love to see a family event on the west side. That number has to be limited, but
that's a storyteller that comes and does history. You know, in a really lively and exciting way. So, yeah. Well, I think the key is what we're all trying to get to, I guess, is we want flexible space that can meet a lot of different needs, right? It's not one thing, it's not another. And I just want to be sure that we take the time to design the plan on the east side for those flexible uses. And that's what I really want, if there's direction to the consultant, is to get to that idea that there's a lot of things we can do on this property. And we need to make sure that whatever is designed and ultimately implemented provides for that flexibility. So to that extent, I think this is another one that we want to share with the consultant, that we've got some objectives for different agricultural activities than were perhaps anticipated in this plan, and is there space for those available on that plan, and they can make those recommendations. We wanted to, if we're done with number 4, a working farm, do we want to take up, I think Sally's list is now next in the packet. And Sally, I'll let you go through that to address your ideas to the extent that I see there are some duplications, but maybe you want to clarify some of your items.
Hi there again. There are many duplications. Is this a time when maybe we should talk about the fire pit area, or do you want to put that some other time?
Works for me.
Okay, let's talk about it. Lots of feedback from the public on that. Not a lot of positive feedback on that. Comments from anyone?
I would agree. I think we heard a lot of feedback that perhaps it was not safe in terms of a historic location. And I think the goal, I guess the way I interpreted that was that it was a feature that created community gathering, but it in of itself, given the historic nature of some of these buildings, may not be, that community gathering idea might be implemented in a different way. So that's where I come down on that.
One of the things that was a little harder for me to understand was some of the comments were they preferred not to have formal spaces for people gathering in kind of a particular way. What I mean by that is not really desiring to have picnic tables. So they wanted, it sounded like they wanted a more low touch type environment. Other people have different interpretation or thoughts about that?
I personally am not against a gathering place. That makes a lot of sense if there's a tour and the group going on a tour is forming and that kind of thing. But I think low touch was a good comment. Certainly, you could have places to sit that are, cross sections of logs or Adirondack chairs or something like that. That's a great place for people to maybe sit and talk or whatever. So.
I will say we might talk about signage because again, there was lots of feedback about that. What I took away was basically a lot of the formal signage, or maybe the amount of formal signage people were distressed about. as were they about some of the more sculptural elements. So maybe we can get some feedback from people on that. But before that, I do believe that there should be some simple signage that recognizes the farm, but it doesn't have to be a billboard. And then that there are a few different ways, and I'm sure people will bring it up here, that people can get themselves around the property. There was quite a bit of visual feedback brought in about other ways of getting people around the property rather than such formal signage, whether it be maps or just a little more low tech, a few pointing arrows, things like that. Anybody have comments?
I agree with your comments on the signage. I think perhaps on the plan, they were represented somewhat out of scale, I think, to what at least my vision was about signage. I do think if individuals are allowed to explore the property by themselves, they do need wayfinding signage, they do need information about the historic nature. And again, this would be if the property is deemed to be available to individuals to explore without the context of a program. I think on the plan, it kind of looked like, oh my gosh, there's a sign every 5 feet. And certainly those would be discrete, they would not be big. And so I'm sort of in agreement that signage is designed to help people interpret and enjoy the property, but it's not designed to be in a scale that is inappropriate. And so I think the signage we can work through, and that can be something that we do perhaps down the road when we get into implementation and get ideas about how to do that. I want to go back. Does anybody have comments on signage that they want to make? Because I want to go back to do that and then go back to the fire pit, because I don't know if we finished the discussion on that.
I would agree with Sally and Lucinda. I think that, again, less is more. Typically what you see with some of these historic properties is this over interpretation where there's just signs everywhere. And it generates, in my opinion, a lot of visual clutter, where if the signage is low key and understated, tells you where it is. And Sally, I think that you're absolutely right. A low tech solution to this would be ideal. Maps. I mean, thankfully the property is not so complicated that people that are there are going to get lost. I mean, there are half a dozen or so buildings there that are likely going to be the ones that are going to be used. So I don't think that it's going to be so confusing that people are going to have problems with it.
I think one of the suggestions we got was pamphlets or maps, and I would really like to mix that. And as I said in my comments, my experience with venues that use those things, either the ground is cluttered with them when they get tossed, or somebody's always cleaning them up. So I really think signs are preferable to pamphlets.
And to your point, Christine, I mean, certainly nowadays, and you're right, I mean, maybe it's not a low tech, maybe it's a high tech solution, maybe it's an app, maybe it's something that you can access on your phone to where you can have a visual map or virtual map, of the property that you have on your iPhone or your device. So yeah, that's a good point.
Anything else on signage? Okay, back to the fire pit. Did we come to consensus on the fire pit?
Well, what exactly is wrong with the fire pit idea? What's the objection to it, other than I heard too much hardscape? Does that mean that it is too artificial? I know that you would not have had one in the late 1890s or early 20th century farm. But on the other hand, I thought, you know, my envision is here's a bunch of kids sitting around the campfire telling stories or reliving the day or whatever they were doing in a facility that was a lot safer than just an open bonfire. So I didn't see anything wrong with it. And I thought it accomplished some gathering point that would have been fun for the kids. But there's a lot of objection to it, particularly on the eastern neighbors. And I don't know whether it's the fact that it's artificial and that they would be, well, of course they would be happy maybe with no fires at all. That's okay, it's a safety issue, I understand that. And there was objection to, well, we don't even want a gas-fired fire pit, it's too artificial. And if that's, and that's fine, I mean, I'm not making a case for the fire pit, I'm trying to understand where's the line, where do we draw the line between the functionality and the fact that it's not really authentic in terms of a turn of the century farm.
I think there was
I don't know the answer to that.
I don't mean to interrupt. There was a lot of objection to the fire pit. I think for one thing, it is kind of artificial. Also, there are no fires allowed in the village in any other parks. And it seems, I don't know, why would you have it here? I think you probably do need a gathering place. I sort of object also to the idea of the big barn being an event center. I think that's one of the jewels of this whole farm is the big barn, and it needs to be restored. I don't think the fire pit is in keeping with that. I guess that would just, and I think there was a lot of objection to.
Well, then I think, okay, I think I could go along with that. Then I think the instruction that we ought to give to the consultants is, here's a list of activities that we've decided we want to have take place over there. I think we're going to have to get to some closure on the equestrian issue, maybe with the help of Natalie, because one of the general comments is you're not, the current master plan doesn't reflect what Kat would have had in mind. And I think Natalie realizes that what Kat had in mind, meaning the pony club per se, is really not maybe possible today. So we've got two people here, Natalie and representing the family, not just herself, and Sydney Macy, who was there talking with Kat, helping her through this conservation easement. No doubt what will live in fact, but let's leave out the lawyer out of this for the moment. And the consultant, you know, the direction of the consultants would be, here's a list of activities. Now take this and put it in the context and turn this farm and its design into an early 20th century farm and leave out everything that's artificial, except what you need to do to accommodate this list of activities. That's the guidance I would give to these consultants.
I hadn't entered the big barn on my list as a specific entity to be discussed, but does anybody have anything else they want to add at this point since it just came up, or something else?
I don't know the event center comment, because I certainly didn't know that was contemplated.
It's listed in the master plan.
Can you show me where?
I'm sorry.
No, we can do it offline. It's fine.
Yeah.
Just show me where. That'd be great.
Because that was not my understanding.
And I'm sorry, I'm not prepared to find it today.
No.
But it does mention that it might be an event center, and I had mentioned this to Emily, and Emily said that it would be for small events. Because the barn, I do not think the stalls should be taken out. I think they're beautiful.
I agree with you. There was comment early on in one of the open house meetings about events being at the location. But I don't recall that we specifically identified the barn as an event center, so I'd love to see that, because we do wanna make sure we pay. That'd be great, thank you.
I would just say no to the fire pit for many reasons. One, the feedback we've gotten from it. Two, how often it would really be used. Like, you know, if we're gonna have a stargazing event where it's dark out, I think it's a little chilly, I could see that would be one of the few times you use it. And three, the cost of it. It's gonna cost $40,000 to $50,000 if you put in a large enough. I looked into it recently, and so for open amounts. But the thing is I think that the consultants can gain a lot from watching the YouTube videos of all of these meetings with all the public input, seeing what everybody's written in. Emily, I think that's another important aspect, that when they're considering any of these additional costs for their services, these ad services, that they should go through that, because I think that's going to also shed a lot of light onto what we're talking about and trying to interpret here too. But those are my 2 points.
Yes, and if I can jump in, the consultant has watched the June 9th recording after that meeting happened, and then I'm sure they'll be reviewing this one as well. So they have access to these recordings just like, you know, everyone does on the website and YouTube. So yes, they watched the whole last meeting, and I'm sure they'll be watching this one as well.
So do we have specific direction on the inclusion or exclusion of the fire pit?
I personally think, based on what we've heard, and I honestly think it doesn't really fit in with this facility at this time.
How many agree with that position? Paul?
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll suggest that the fire pit be removed. Signage, I think we need to continue to work on. Sally, what other items from your list did you want to address?
You know, I think there are a couple we could address, and I'm going to let you pick or not pick.
I don't want to pick.
There's a moon gate issue, and the sort of formality of gates in general. And then another one is there were some comments about the pond and changing the size of the pond. So anybody have thoughts about what they want to talk about or what they don't want to talk about?
I guess I would just say, I think the viewing platform, as it's envisioned, is too large, too elaborate, particularly with the roof and everything. That's my comment. That's my personal comment. I'm not reflecting what was said, but that would just be my personal comment.
Well, I personally would like to see an observation platform. I don't think it makes any difference whether it's big structure covered or not. Everyone, not going to protect anybody from the rain from getting there to that observation deck. But the idea was that there is, as you know, and the pictures that we're talking about, birds coming there recently, there is wildlife there to enjoy a division. My kids were out there looking at, I think it was a turtle my grandkids over the last weekend, sitting on a log somewhere. Well, the idea is that it's not safe to approach the pond now. Steep, downhill, certainly nothing you could do that would be ADA compliant. And so the idea is to have this observation deck, but not have it extend over the water. I mean, it wouldn't go out into the pond itself. It would just be a level place to sit, stand, and watch and observe the wildlife that's there. which would be enhanced, I understand, from one of the three options of what you would do with the pond, which is to dredge it deeper so it would support more wildlife than it can right now. I think it's only about 4 feet deep or something like that. And use that dredged material to create a wetlands in part of the pond, which would support more in a more varied kind of life than it can right now. So that seems the way to go, but I don't think we need an elaborate covered structure. And it's also some way that we can get some value back to the citizens of this village rather quickly and inexpensively.
I would agree with that. And I'm sorry, it's a wonderful place. I know that, is it Walt Stinson took the photo of, this was 10 or 12 white pelicans on the pond. They were all grouped together. It's a beautiful photo if we can get it. Also, and over the years, there's a log on one end, probably on your end of the pond. There's a turtle that hangs out there. Yes, it is a very nice place. I think though, the too elaborate viewing on that, it's not that large a pond, is going to diminish the kind of wildlife we get. So I think it should be, as we were saying, less is more.
To provide, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. To provide some background about why we opted to go with something covered is that there's very little shade out there in the afternoon. So we've had during past Kent Denver summer camps that we had at the farm, you know, we've had the teachers have kids out there at the pond and they would do sketching activities and wildlife identification activities. And all these kids tried to crowd themselves under the one cottonwood kind of near the bench that's there right now. And it was really difficult to keep them comfortable and be doing activities out at the pond in the summer. So the thought behind having it covered was to make it a space that's a little bit more comfortable for kids to do an activity or for people to linger. And then just echoing everything that Gordon said about an accessible way to get to the pond that's safe. And then we're also trying to balance the fact that the pond is considered part of the west area in the conservation easement. So we worked closely with Colorado Open Lands on, you know, those idea photos for the structure and what it would look like and how it would work, because there is a balance that we have to strike between treating the pond as an area that has limited public access as part of the west side, and how to limit that access directly to the pond while giving people a safe and comfortable way to interact with the pond and enjoy the wildlife. So that's part of the background about that structure. But point taken, I mean, those are idea photos, right? They're not the design. So that could be scaled back when we get to that point and make it really rustic looking.
I think we were influenced by our visit to Star K Ranch, which is a property up near not Stapleton, DIA. And it was a very engaging, low impact place that really did encourage folks to want to learn more. I mean, I think that's the goal, is that rather than going by so quickly, is please do stop and ponder and please do understand this gift and let us know. And I think it does have to absolutely be balanced with concern for impact on wildlife, because that's the key component that is driving Colorado Open Lands decision, is what is impact. What is that environmental impact? And so they're very, very sensitive to that. And I think we have to be thoughtful about that. And nobody here, I don't believe, is interested in an over-designed structure.
So is it important at this point just to say we don't want the structure over-designed, or is it important to say it should be a structure without a roof, or does that not matter at this point?
Well, I think the goal of the master plan is to provide options and ideas and flexibility and not get into the weeds in terms of how specific things are designed or looked at. That's really more the implementation phase. And so right now, we just have to look, to Dino's point, kind of at the 30,000 foot level and make sure that the suggested uses and how if we change the property, how that impacts use and flexibility of the space. So I would say not get in the weeds at this point, but just say the idea of a wildlife viewing platform is something to be considered. Y'all chime in.
I think it's a good idea. My only comment would be don't overbuild it, keep it simple, in keeping with the rest of the ideas that have come up about the farm.
The only thing is, I have to admit that I never really considered a class there. But, but it's a great place for a class. And so, it needs to be ADA compliant and maybe a small class. I don't know what the small class is, but anyway, but I agree also with what Gordon has said, that this is a place where we can get really get some good mileage for the public, and there's some wonderful things to see on that pond. So
I would agree with that also. We live right across from the pond, which is one reason I'm interested in not having too large a structure. It is constantly used. There are children and people there from 6 in the morning. I mean, not always, but it's certainly, people stop there, children love it.
I also think a structure will keep people away from trying to go in the pond. Yes, I was photographing some kids there once with their parents, and the 2-year-old was like, I had to throw my camera down to grab her because she just headed right for the water for the thing. So it's, tempting.
Yeah. Or dogs also.
Do you want to discuss anything about I'll give you a couple options here. Nature center location, and then or the historic reference building. And then there was kind of a sidelight brought up by Jerry about correcting some of the historic details in previous documents, which isn't really part of what should the consultant look at here. I just wanted to mention it again. So any thoughts about the garage house question or nature center, or maybe not now, or the historic reference building?
So I think the original thought process was that, and Emily, help me get the language right, that the nature or Kat's former residence is considered a nature center interpretive facility. Is that correct?
Yes, that's right.
And that it therefore has the uses under the easement for those purposes and those purposes only.
Yes, we set a specific, the committee worked on, last year, worked on a specific document suggesting possible uses that the committee felt were appropriate for that type of building, and Colorado Open Lands gave feedback on that. So we have a document of accepted uses for the main house as a nature center, interpretive center, that's been approved by Colorado Open Lands.
Right, and then the use of the garage was designed to be a space potentially for messy play, children's activities, and it was thought to be an easy way. This came up in the conversation of 2 years ago when we were considering access issues on the west side, and it was designed to be a solution to help activate, quote unquote, activate the property to make it accessible to citizens, which I think we heard from council was an important consideration. Is that also correct? And
Yes.
are we still assuming that are the wishes of the committee as we move forward? I'm seeing heads nod.
Okay.
Yes, I'm giving you a yes on all that. I mean, I am aware of all that. I just bring it up again for completeness because many citizens brought it up. And, you know, again, some of the more closely related citizens said, why don't you tear the house down? You know, that's not something maybe we need to decide at the moment here.
No, I don't think we want to decide that right now.
Then the only other thing, if we're done with that issue at this time, would be, does anybody want to consider some of the feedback on the 3-rail fence, the moon gate type thing, or want to let that rest?
I think fencing is specifically called out in the easement.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that design consideration is addressed and we can't do anything with it. The moon gates, we can have a conversation about it, or however we want to do, if we want to continue to provide feedback to the consultant. I'm going to defend the moon gates. Sorry. I put in my notes, I think they serve a lot of purposes, and they also can be natural. I mean, what they're made out of can be natural. First of all, what the consultants were doing was trying to pick up on the theme that's already established on the property, where the gates, you know, as they close, they form, well, a half of a circle. And for me, the moon gates draw us through the property. And, you know, it also brings together the east and the west sides by having sort of the same thing. And the consultants were also talking about how to frames views. And we heard the comment, well, you know, why don't frame views? People will just get their views. But I think they will also have their own views, and then some can be further framed, you know, and a lot of times we see something that's more beautiful because it's being framed. So I don't see that as terribly expensive, although Lucinda has told me that I can pay for them if I like it. Yes, thank you, Christina. No, I agree. I mean, as a design element, the pictures are representative. They're not, again, designed to be the final rendering of this. There is, when you're working with a big space, there is a nice idea of creating unity within the space with repetition and common design features. That is what makes a place feel pleasing to individuals as they walk through it. I personally have no problem with the moon gates. I think they could be added, though, certainly at a later time. They were influenced by this existing historical gate. What their future interpretation is or addition, that maybe we may still be several years away from that. So we can either choose to take them out now, not address them now, or you know, offer some, if they're done, you know, make them simple, rustic, but consistent with the design principles.
I'd just like to offer a comment. The one that's shown here that I have in my packet, I think is fine. I'm sorry, Clausina, I think of moon gates as kind of a hippie thing from the 60s or something. And I thought, in a traditional farm, so I guess that I would say that if we're going to have moon gates, they should be more in keeping with the farm.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, the moon gates are aesthetically pleasing, pleasant. I understand the symbology behind them and certainly framing, some of the view corridors, but this is a historic working ranch, or was. I don't see that these comport with that mission set. Again, I'm not opposed to the moon gates, but I don't think they're appropriate for this property.
Well, Kat herself, I think, had sort of a arbor, and so it's not contrary to, certainly not contrary to gardening. And I think that.
And maybe down the road, maybe they could be incorporated. I just don't see this as a primary focus. I mean, there's a cost associated with it. For me, I would rather focus on the education, programming, the customers, the people that are coming to visit, rather than the aesthetic refreshments. But maybe this is something we can, revisit down the road.
I would just remind everyone also that, things can be included in the site plan and phased in. And that the site plan should sort of be seen as a menu of all the possible options that can be done. But certainly when it comes to phasing and budgeting, everything's not going to, happen day one. So, you can always include them in the plan and say these should be, somewhere later. They should be in a later phase if, we want to tackle, the outdoor classroom first, so that we have that sort of service for the community first before the aesthetics. You can certainly include them in the site plan, but give an indication that you'd prefer them to be, that they're less of a priority, or that you would prefer them to come later than other items.
I certainly agree that they are not integral to the activity.
Lucinda, I think Debbie has that.
It could also be noted in the consultant's report that citizens, also said that they would prefer to have the farm be more consistent with the historic and didn't espouse the community. I mean, if the staff were going to put them in, it should be reflected, I think, accurately with the feelings of the community.
So noted.
Thank you.
Okay, Sal, did you have more that you wanted to address?
I don't have physical structural things. The only thing I'll touch on, and it may again not be it may not be totally appropriate for this time, are any communication details we want to talk about, like ways to communicate, ways to hear what people need to say, or leave that and move on with more structural things that'll go to the consultants.
Sally, when I saw that in your list, I thought it was great that you included that. I'm wondering if it belongs in a discussion today. I think as a committee, we should discuss that at some point.
I didn't quite hear if you said discuss today or move to a different time.
Well, it's that's the question. Our current plan is we don't have a plan past July 21st. Our next meeting is with the consultant, and I've received feedback that the format of that meeting may wish to be changed. And that is an issue that I want to address with the committee and how they feel about that and what the next steps ought to be. I know that our timeline has been changed. because of the feedback we've received. And so we just need to keep being flexible and making those adjustments as we go along and know that this is an iterative process. And, you know, we're gonna continue to work, make steps forward and make some steps sideways and keep working through it and continue on. So right now, as I understand it, we are planning to get comments back to the consultants. Emily will address with the consultants, any potential changes needed to the contract and timing and extension of the contract with the consultants. And then the consultants will be at our next meeting. And so the format of how they do that presentation and what kind of Q&A and feedback and interactive discussion still needs to be considered as to whether that meeting operates more like an open house. And it isn't a meeting where we make decisions. It is a meeting where we get feedback and we're all allowed to participate. So that is an option that has been suggested to us, and I kind of want to get everybody's ideas as to how, I'm not sure, well, once we get through this, and I've got to look and see if we have any more substantive issues to share from our current feedback, but how do you all feel about having the next meeting be more of an open house and less of a meeting like this format?
I like the idea of an open house. I think it encourages freer discussion. And I mean, maybe it's presumptuous to suggest this, but I mean, maybe we bring in a few teachers or someone where we can maybe dip our toes into the programming, which might help shape some of the discussion on use of the farm. It might be premature to engage the consultants in July. I don't know that, I mean, unless we have more, concrete notes, maybe we share those notes, but I like the idea of the open house.
What would we, I do think we have concrete notes to go back to the consultant with. I think we have specific responses to the site plan that need to be addressed. And I'd sort of like to stay on that path of getting the uses of the property identified so that we can move forward with figuring out what the cost and the budgets might be, because that's another piece that has to be included in the final report. And I hear what you say about programming, and we can certainly explore those opportunities. I really want us to focus on the task ahead of us, which is getting the site uses identified, clearly identified, make sure we have the appropriate flexibility so that citizens, so it can morph, so the property in 50 years might have different objectives. And so I kind of want to keep focused on that if we could, and then continue to, I think it'd be good if we get, Emily, do you have, I don't know how far you are along in drafting the programming ideas, or can we give Dino some information from older drafts of older documents that kind of help him understand the programming that we've considered in the past?
Yes.
So we're talking about two different things.
So I had some thoughts. I think that we had generated, some fairly concrete thoughts today, and I almost would not want to see an open house until the consultants have sort of incorporated this into it. Whether that can be done by the end of July, I doubt it. I don't know. But and I think that would make sense. That one of the reasons that I think that we got such great feedback from people in the village is because we've got a picture. And so if there could be another picture with some of the changes, then that would be something that everybody that we've seen who's come forward could then come back and say, okay, what do I think is still missing, or what do I like?
So can we distill this then into a phase one? All of the concrete, all the decisions and, that we've made, the suggestions that we've made for the consultants, can we distill this into a phase one plan? All of the things that we'd like to see happen at the very beginning, at the launch, at the activation of the property, is it something that we can, formulate that into, maybe this is a 2-phase or a 3-phase, master plan where, what are we looking to accomplish initially? Again, maybe the moon gates are phase 2, maybe they're phase 3, maybe they're phase 1, but at least we have an idea, a specific, list of how, what we're looking to do at the initial launch of the property.
Part of the idea was to really get the costs back on different elements of the property in order to make those decisions.
So this is it cost driven or is it idea driven?
From a practical standpoint, it's both.
Right. So how do we find, I guess we need to find that balance. I mean, I guess in my mind, we would choose, we would determine what we'd like to see happen there in phase one. And then when those costs come back, then if some of them are unreasonable or maybe not feasible, then we can maybe push those to phase 2, perhaps. I don't know. I'm open to suggestions, but in my mind, I would like to see something tangible that would, what phase 1 would look like. Because right now there are a lot of great ideas. I know we've included a lot of them. Some of them we've excluded, but it would be nice to see that in some sort of a plan that delineates what we're looking to have at the initial launch and so forth, and subsequent iterations of it.
I think that we're already going to be we're probably already going to be increasing our cost from the consultant to redo a couple different options for the site plan. I would suggest incorporating phasing into the written plan, and breaking it down in a list, but continuing to work with one site plan that has sort of the final, like if you were to get through all of the phases, that's going to show all of those elements, because otherwise we're going to possibly be looking at a significant cost from the consultant to do, 3 or 4 different site plans with all the different phasing on it. And I think that that's something that we can accomplish in the meat of the plan, but give someone sort of the final product to look at.
And forgive me, that I wasn't suggesting that we come up with different plans. I know that it's possible to do an overlay so that phase 1, appears in its existing document, and then phase 2 adds additional points and additions to the property and so forth. But I'm open. I'm not suggesting that we come up with different documents, but it can be as easy as just an overlay, so that the phase 1 has the modifications and changes and additions to it, and then when you click the next button, it adds those phase 2 points and so forth.
So is the idea for the okay, so my notes I have for the consultant to create different options for the committee, different options for parking, different options for the bridge, so that you all would be able to look at that at hopefully for your next meeting. Is that much correct that I have?
That's correct.
Okay, so why don't we focus on that as the first task for the consultant, and then once we've determined the direction we're going with the site plan, then we can look at possible phased, layer site plans. But I think we need to get through that first step before we start adding phasing into multiple different options for site plans.
So one idea could be is that if in fact, and I think this will be dependent on what the consultant responds, is if it's possible for them to have that work done by July 21st.
Yes, which I am guessing that's going to be too tight, because really they need to have it done in order for us to send packets out to you all, which is really the week before. So it gives them basically exactly 2 weeks with the holiday weekend in there. And if the cost I'll talk to them about cost. Hopefully they'll just be able to keep working through, but we might need council to extend their contract before they'll commit to more site plans. So I will check on that first.
So maybe what we need to do is find out that information before we determine what the July 21st meeting looks like.
I think that's a good assessment.
And we may have to push the consultant presentation off to an August meeting.
Yes.
And then am I hearing that you want to review the plan first before having an open house?
I have no preference. I would leave that up to the committee.
I don't quite understand what you mean by an open house. I'm thinking the open house that we came to in January, the only thing I think is that not everyone is able to hear what is being said. So I don't exactly understand what you mean by having an open house meeting.
It's just another opportunity to have folks come and we're gonna have, I anticipate that we're gonna go back to the consultant with new direction, new options. They'll come back to us with ideas. And so the question is, do they come back to us first and then we present it in a group setting as opposed to presenting it just in a packet and letting people respond? If we have an opportunity to have the consultant present, okay, here are the options, here's what the committee discussed, here's where we are going. Now we want feedback on this of it, and do that in an open house setting that I would say needs to be, I think in the past they've been sort of, those charrettes have been up along the wall and we use sticky notes and maybe we have a more discussion or conversation.
Yes, I think that was maybe the consultants came to some conclusions without having more input from the villagers.
I think we should see what they come back with and vet some of that first before presenting it to the public. We get a good sense of what the public is looking for.
Okay, so now what I think I'm hearing is July may be tight. We work through these logistical changes in our relationship and financial relationship with the consultant. And our meeting in August would be when normally?
August 3rd. Oh, no, sorry. August 18th.
Okay. So we've got a lot of things to do between now and then, I think. One is get clarity on council's approval to increase and extend the contract. We want to give options back to the consultant for them to redraft. And then we want them to come back to us. And so I think, is that doable by the August meeting to come back to our group? And maybe not have a July meeting.
I think that's probably reasonable.
Because we still need to go to PTRC, I think, with our recommendation this month. And we still have, are in July, and we have to go to council in July. So we'll still have work that we have to do in July. We'll just be waiting for the next draft of the plan. And in the meantime, we can start to inform the other sections that are not in draft form and written yet. So now we're thinking about August, we hear back from the consultant, assuming all those other pieces get put into place. And then maybe in September have another group get together.
Yes, but I don't have anything coming from Quincy Farm Committee and going to PTRC in July.
Do I not have to take the recommendation for the caretaker to them?
No, council only asked for Quincy Farm Committee.
Okay. All right, well, that's good to know. So comments on the proposed timeline and next steps. Sounds good to me. Everybody okay with that? Okay, all right. Emily, do you have enough direction from us on that?
I believe so. The only question would be clarifying whether the committee wants to have that July meeting then or not. So we probably won't have anything new from the consultant. The committee could talk more about programming and use at that meeting if you so choose, or if you think it makes more sense to wait until you have sort of the site plan and the layout determined, then we can cancel that meeting and have those discussions in August.
Well, will you have the programming section done?
I could have a draft done for that July meeting, yes.
You guys want to look at that?
And it will be a rough draft because we really want your input before we put too much effort into it. And I think like the discussions we had today were great and can go right into that section and really help formulate that section. So I think that would be a good idea.
Okay, so we would have a July meeting, and the primary item on that is to discuss and dive into programming opportunities and things that we want to consider that go along with the uses of the site plan. Does that make sense?
That sounds good to me.
All right. All right.
I have one question, Lucinda. Is the July 21st meeting the appropriate place to talk about any interim plan programming, like for the falls, somewhat like they did last year, if that's going to be part of it?
Well, we had a request from the Land Preserve to do programming, some ideas for programming moving forward in 2020, consistent with, social distancing and COVID, and that is on my list still to address. So I want to make sure we're done though with the master plan stuff. Any other comments?
Well, I don't think I've got anything on my comment thing that's worth it. Commenting further on all these things. I'm sure you're glad to hear. I think I would spend as much time as we can get out of Natalie between now and the 21st for two things. One, that we really understand what she thinks the family would like to see and not see. And number two, with all these issues, I mean, even the little ones, whatever it is on Harriet LeMaire's list. And secondly, to help resolve this issue of her vision today of the equestrian issue. It seems like that's, a big part of designing what is and is not going to happen over there on the east side. So with that, I don't think I would have any more comments on individual parts of the master plan.
I know I'm speaking out of turn, but might it be useful to have Sydney Macy and Brooke Fox come to tell you how to query some things along with Natalie?
Yeah, I think more outreach is better. And I think what I would like to do, so what Lisa suggested, and I don't know if everybody heard it, was if we got additional input from Sydney Macy and Brooke Fox, who runs CAF, to get more clarity on this vision that has been suggested. And I would ask each committee member to take time, if they can, if they've not already done so, to reach out to some of these stakeholders personally. Just so you remember, 2 people can chat. And I think it's good for us to have these individual conversations. I think we can make names and numbers available. And if we do want to have Brooke and Sydney come maybe to July, if they're available, and provide some information, we can do that. What do y'all think about that?
I have a comment about, I'm happy to contact Brooke Fox. I've been to Lowell Ranch. Seeing her facility in operation could be interesting as well. Rather than having her come to the meeting, it might be interesting to arrange a visit to Lowell Ranch, and I'm happy to do that if you want to. But so maybe the committee could give feedback. The reason I mention that is our visit to Starkey Ranch and the 4 Mile Park was pretty interesting.
Yeah, we had, I don't know that everybody went. We did have 2 field trips last spring. We went to 4 Mile House and Starkey Ranch, and that helped the committee kind of get different ideas on different models, specifically governmentally operated and nonprofit operated facilities, and helped us. And then there were specific ideas about how they were integrated into Starkey. Particularly, it is on a trail. I can't remember the name of it, but it's how that property is also integrated to the trail that was instructive, and the kinds of programming that they did there. And 4 Mile was instructive because of its location in an urban setting, which I think, considering those logistics and what that looks like. So we can do another field trip, or who's ever available could do a field trip. If you wanna, is that something folks wanna do?
Absolutely. What are the logistics of, as a committee, maybe going back out to Quincy Farm? I mean, I've only visited a few times. I think it would be helpful if we as a committee spent a little time and maybe just, revisited the property. Is that,
It's possible. We just, as a committee, it's a public meeting, so we just have to put it out there.
So maybe, is it possible for the July meeting, maybe we meet out there instead?
The challenge with meeting out there for the July meeting is we don't have Zoom. And
That's correct. So that would be the limitation.
That's the limitation. And so folks, we're in an interesting time. So that, I think it's a great idea, but we just gotta make it, since it's a public meeting.
Because of, we don't have is it because of connectivity? I mean,
there's no internet on the west side. Well, there's no internet on the west side of the farm.
I mean, we could easily tie in a cell service, create a hotspot. That's a very simple procedure, but I'm sure we could make that work. But anyhow,
There's also a lot smaller meeting space, so we would not be able to accommodate. I don't know off the top of my head how many people could safely fit in the largest room, but I don't believe we'd be able to accommodate more than a few members of the public in that case. I would suggest having the July meeting in council chambers, and if the committee would like, we can always schedule, a separate time for the whole committee to go out to Quincy Farm and talk also. And yes, it would be a public meeting. We would notice it to the public ahead of time so that people could also visit if they choose.
That's perfect. Thank you.
Is there interest at all in visiting Lowell Ranch?
That's the Wood Fox calf facility.
How far is that?
It's about down towards Castle Rock. It's down towards Castle Rock.
Go ahead, Sal.
And no, basically it's a historic ranch that is doing many of the things we're talking about. Um, it stands for, I think it stands for cultural or agricultural leadership
Foundation.
farm, yeah. And they bring in some animal husbandry people like FFA and 4-H. They do have outdoor gardens. They do maintain a few animals there. They do have tours of the property. I don't know exactly how they're funding, but again, it gives that example. I'm sure she could give all this information to a group meeting, but one of the things I found about the field trips that we did have last year is a picture is really worth 1,000 words when you're standing there, and so that's the only reason I recommend seeing if there's a possibility that we might be able to go down there as a group of whoever's available.
Okay, so the idea would be the July meeting here to go over programming. We would have a field trip to Quincy Farm that would be a public meeting. And then we would have a field trip to Lowell Ranch in Castle Rock. Is that correct?
Yeah, let's do it.
Emily, can you help us get those scheduled, please?
Yes, I will send out polls for the Quincy Farm field trip. And Sally, would you mind working with me to schedule the Lowell Ranch one?
Yep, I'll contact her and find out what the possibilities are.
That would be awesome. Thank you.
Okay, I think we have next steps. I think we have direction to the consultant. I think we went through all the comments. Are there any more comments that we should be considering at this time to give direction to the consultant?
I do not have it.
Everybody shaking their head no? Okay. All right, so that will conclude the section on master plan, draft written plan. Any new business to be brought before the committee? Emily, do you have anything?
Sorry, I had muted myself. No, there's no new business from staff.
Okay. Any reports from the group? I guess chair goes first, and again, I want to thank sincerely everyone who has come forward and provided feedback with the draft master plan. Your input is valuable. I think I speak for all of us when I say that our goal, like yours, is to get this right. And we'll take the time that we need to do to get it right. So thank you for all of your understanding, your time and effort and patience and persistence. And I think we've still got a long way to go, but we'll get there. And I'm confident that we will. I'm really impressed with the expertise on this committee. Everybody brings, different viewpoints, and that makes it robust and interesting, and the conversations are diverse, and they're all welcome. I want us to continue to discussing and reaching out. I want us to reach out to individual members as you see fit of the community to get additional impact, because again, this is a plan that needs to work for the entire community. Okay, that's all I have to say. Committee members, Rebecca, do you want to start with do you have any report?
I'm sorry, I do not have a report. I think Debbie had another comment. I would just like to say I've enjoyed being on this committee.
Thank you. It's great to have you. We appreciate having the neighbor feedback. It's crucial because we don't all live over there, so we're not seeing the things you're seeing. Thank you. Dina.
I don't have anything.
Joel.
Not this time.
Christina. No report. Okay.
No report.
Gordon. Sally.
I think I'm good.
Okay.
City staff, do you have a report?
I have nothing else to report.
Okay. Debbie, yes.
I was wondering if in this interim period between now and when the village has a consultant, what the role of the Quincy Farm Committee will be in assisting the village understand what really can be done from a maintenance perspective on the east side. And again, the interest is to make sure that the committee is not surprised by things that are happening over there. And they're kept apprised of it and are part of it, because my understanding is that you are the shepherds of this property, and we care more about this property and know more about it than many. And I think it's important for that oversight to occur.
I will do my best to stay in touch with city staff and talk about projects and maintenance as they're ongoing. Our charter, according to our ordinance, is to develop the master plan, of which one part is maintenance. And we haven't developed those decisions yet, but I'm happy to stay in touch with the staff here and find out what's going on. Okay, any other comments? Okay, if hearing none, I'll move for adjournment. So moved, seconded, we're adjourned at 11:15. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you all.